All right. Richard should now be doing his chatter on the feed. And we've got a few more minutes to kind of wait for Jacob, and I can help you out, Paris, with getting your computer online. Live. You're live.
I'm only coming through on Zoom. Now you can all hear me, huh? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday of the IJA's virtualized conference. Let me click a couple of things here and click that. And now you should just be hearing me and you won't be hearing Zoom in a perfect world. Hello, welcome to my studio. My name is Richard Hartnell. I am a juggler based in Bellingham, Washington, USA. I've been a working juggler up and down the West Coast and across the pond over to the EJC and the Edinburgh Fringe for quite a while, and it's been a great pleasure to count many of you in this stream as colleagues and friends in the traveling family of circus artists. I will be acting today as the streaming tech, so it's my job to make sure that everybody gets onto the internet. I'm really excited to present today's programming. I'm really honored to be able to bring this job to bring this work to everybody. We've got a really stellar set of programming for you all today. First off, we've got the Race and Juggling panel starring a bunch of jugglers who are going to have a talk about demography in juggling. There's also, if I were an adult presenter, I would have also looked up the time of the feminism in juggling panel. I am hidden. Curious. Oh, let's see. No, wait. This is okay. I'm reading the wrong chat. I have so many interfaces going on right now. For my trick today, my juggling trick will be to juggle 4 or 5 video inputs and like a whole bunch of outputs. In fact, I can kind of show you here. Take a little tour here. We've got the audio mixer. We've got the second audio mixer. We've got the third audio mixer. We've got a camera, which I can't show you because I'm pointing it at things. It's really a sight. So a little bit, I guess, about what's going on. My intention here right now, after so many juggling festivals have kind of gone out to the internet at 2 frames per second or 0 frames per second, had audio video issues and all that kind of stuff. I'm really happy to be able to put a really big pipe on the back of a computer and send a ton of information out to all of you so that all of this stuff comes through crispy clean. So preemptive apologies if there are any hiccups or jitters or whatever in the situation today. In fact, I'm supposed to be running a performance meter right now. Looks like everything should be good. We do anticipate a little bit of maybe audio hiccuping during the IRC show later. If you are on Facebook Live, they have some finicky audio robots that sit and listen to the stream and occasionally interfere with the sound. But there are moderators out there in the world whose job it is to kind of facilitate people moving back and forth to the most effective platform if it is necessary. We are broadcasting today on YouTube Live and on Facebook Live. So some of you, hello to those of you who are out there on Facebook, hello to those of you who are out there on YouTube, and hello to those of you who are here waiting for our panel to begin for the up-and-coming Race in Juggling panel. Following the Race and Juggling panel, we'll be taking a short break, maybe like 15-30 minutes, and then we'll be bringing you the international regional competition, a really solid show made up of some of the best acts from all these different regions in the world. We've got African competitors, we've got Middle Eastern competitors, we have North American competitors, we have South and Central American competitors, people from all over the place. And that's the idea. The idea here is to make the International Jugglers Association really as truly international as possible, because as we all know, the circus is beyond language barriers and beyond cultural barriers. Often even beyond barriers of ability. So with the exception of we always want to see jugglers who are great, and it's always great. That's one of the greatest things about juggling, is to practice and not just make the impossible possible in general, but also to make the impossible possible for yourself and to be better today than you were yesterday. That's really the ultimate goal of juggling, I think. and to inspire others and to inspire one another. So hopefully this first panel will inspire you all to really do some more reading on your history and culture and all that, because ultimately we can't stay apolitical. We can't pretend that politics aren't important. If you can't get on stage because some producer doesn't like your look or whatever, then you can't really say that juggling is the only thing that's important to jugglers, right? So hopefully we'll all come out of this panel today with some more context and some more understanding of sort of where people are coming from in a scene that really in a lot of places looks really monochrome, so to speak. But I'll let the panelists speak for themselves. You don't have to listen to what some white dude in the Northwest has to say about ethnicity necessarily. Let's see. So we've got about 6 minutes left real time. We're actually going to get this started timely. Like I have another monitor down here where our panelists are getting ready, all meeting each other and greeting each other. Everybody looks like they're having a really good time, even though I can't see what they're saying yet. Everybody's smiling. Somebody's in their car. Somebody's in his living room. Everybody's it just makes me smile looking at all these people who are really excited to really dive into some goods. And then after the IRC later today, at the end of the day, we're going to have, am I skipping anything? Let's see. Oh, my schedule has disappeared. But I believe that after the IRC, we've got a battle set up by some members of Team Mexico. They're going to get everybody into a Zoom room, and they're going to fight. They're going to have like a battle, like a cipher. The idea is, and I've seen the set list. I don't have it in front of me. I really had to close every part of my computer just to make sure that both of these streams can go out super hi-fi and really nice looking. Let's see. Okay. Can you? Okay, that's what that message is about. Yes. It's a juggling act, just not with physical objects. Yeah, perfecto. Okay. So yeah, they're going to have a battle. I don't have the set list in front of me, but I do remember a couple of jugglers on it. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but I am going to tell you that they're really, really ridiculously good at juggling. And they're going to have a face-off, a series of face-offs with some referees and some judges, including you. You are invited to join the Zoom room pretty much throughout the whole day, with the exception of IRC. That's MCs only. It's a Zoom green room. Haha. But for now, you're invited to the Zoom room. The link should be on the IJA's festival site or on the Facebook page. You can get in there and join as an attendee for their panel and enter questions into the Q&A for the panelists to handle over the course of the panel. At the battle, you are invited into the Zoom where polls will appear after every round, and you are invited to endorse or eliminate competitors who you love or love less. I'm sure you're going to love them all. It's really like an all-star crew, super international team. I'm really, really excited to have maybe some of the most international material of the International Jugglers Association event today. All right, let's see. Everybody is still having a good time over here. What if I bring this over here? Where do I wish I could show you how many monitors are going on right here. That is that, and this is like this. That can hang out over there. Yes. See, we're all going to be experts in all of this online event production stuff just in time to go back to in-person festival season. Just watch. Though that said, if you, a little bit of a shameless plug here, if you are an emerging artist or a working artist and you need somebody to help you hook up a website or a live stream or what have you, you're free to reach out. I run a group called The Oasis. It's the online artists support and insight service. So if you are like, oh geez, the internet is hard, please help, then let me know. And especially if you're a working artist, I'm still taking some pro bono offers right now because as we all know, it's a really hard knock life for circus people right now, and not everybody can bail into online consulting or what have you. Anyway, that's enough about me. We've got just a couple minutes left until we get to this race and juggling panel. I'm really excited to introduce all of these panelists to all of you. They're still smiling. They're having a great time. I'm excited to see them smiling and having a great time with you. It it might get a little heavy. This stuff is heavy, and especially if you're here in the US, This is like a topic on everybody's lips right now. It's it's always been an important issue. Lately, it's become it becomes too important to ignore for more people all the time. And I personally am, if there's anything to be glad for, it's to be glad that these conversations are happening in the open now, and they're involving more people than ever. And it's cool to see, it's cool to see people out across international lines, across borders, learning more languages and getting to know more people and reading more history and just like placing themselves in a context in which we can really, do circus with purpose. The narrative of circus is cool, like tension and release. I throw things up in the air, I catch them again. But then, like, why are we doing that? Like, why are we putting our message out into the world? Hopefully this panel, and assuredly this panel will help us go into the world to impress and inspire and amuse and enlighten audiences more effectively and more compassionately than ever before. So with all of that said, now that you've all listened to me run my mouth for about 10 or 12 minutes, I will be happy to introduce to you our panelists coming up here for the Race and Juggling panel. We are at 2:59, so I've piped my audio back into the Zoom room, which is everybody's signal to await my cue. In just a moment, I'm going to click this here button and bring you from my studio out to a set of panelists out here on the internet. Let's see, their bios are on the Juggling Festival website. If you haven't got the schedule or you're here sort of out of context, you're like, oh, I got this link and what's the IJA even? You can go to juggle.org/festival. And that will give you links to all this stuff. There's a link to all of the panels, and you can get expanded bios for all of these illustrious performers I'm going to bring to you now. For now, I will introduce them to you by name. They are Jacob Dyer, Shavela Schwab, one known solely mysteriously as Paris, and Sam Malcolm. I believe there's a lot of windows in here. I'm pretty sure that I got everybody. So without further ado, please give it up wherever you are. Startle your pets by clapping really loud at your computer for the IJA Conference 2020's Race and Juggling panel.
Hey everybody, my name is Paris. Some of you guys might know me professionally as the hip hop juggler, but I'll be Paris here because we'll be talking a lot about the juggling and the life of what we're doing off of the stage. I'm very happy to be here with a number of different panelists. I'd like to start by giving you guys each a minute to just introduce yourselves. I would like to start with Sam Malcolm. Can you just give us a quick intro of who you are?
Yeah, sure. My name's Sam Malcolm, and that's who I am. I am a juggler that's been in the community for about a decade, and I'm originally from the Fallon Paiute Shoshone Reservation. That's where I grew up. That's where I'm from. That's where all my family is. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here to talk about Indigenous rights issues and how they pertain to all of these things.
Perfect. Next, I'd like to point to Shavela. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Shavela?
Yes, I'm Shavela. I live in Atlanta. I'm part of our Atlanta Jugglers Association down here. I have been juggling for about 20 years, and I have an interesting perspective because I wasn't born in the U.S., but I have had most of my life experience here. So it's a little different for me to be on this panel, and just extremely, really grateful and happy to be here. And being a woman and being Black and a juggler has its own, sets of quirkiness. So that's what I'll be bringing to our panel tonight.
Definitely appreciate you being here. And next, Mr. Jacob Alex Dyer.
Hello, how you doing? Yes, I'm Jacob Alex Dyer. I'm a New York juggler. I began juggling actually with the folks in New York at the Carmine Street Gym around year 2000. And about 10 years later, found myself juggling in a park by myself. Bryant Park, and people started joining me and just never stopped. So we built up a really big group there, big, very active group up until COVID, of course. But we've worked with many people from 130 countries around the world, created a real big community there. And I think it's a very diverse group. And I think we have a lot of things can be learned from our experience in the park there, and having an open and very regular juggling experience that anyone can join in on. So I'm excited to be here.
Excellent, thank you. Unfortunately, Sky King was supposed to be a part of our panel. Sky could not make it tonight, but still we'll have plenty to talk about, and hopefully we'll make Sky proud with the way that this goes. My name is Paris. I am from New York City. I still live here. I grew up in Harlem, and I learned how to juggle from a circus outreach program sponsored by the Big Apple Circus that was built inside of my school. And what they did was they had what was called at the time the Beyond the Ring program, doing more than their show. And I was a bit of a rough kid when I was young. There was a lot of trouble in Harlem in the 80s, and I was desensitized by that. And when I was in school, I was in detention a lot. I liked to fight, and I was in trouble again, and I was always in detention. And one day when I was in detention, I snuck to go to the bathroom. I look at my gym, and then suddenly there is a circus program in there with people doing all kinds of things that I saw were super dangerous but super cool. And I started off as an acrobat. I promised my mom I'd behave if she let me into the program. And then after that, she let me in. About 3 years in, I learned how to juggle. And I caught the juggle bug, been juggling ever since. So that's great that we got all of your origin stories. All you guys come from different places, even within the same city. We both have very different ways of getting about how we got to juggling, which is great. And I just want to say, now that we're moving on, I want to know where you guys, where you guys are from, like your intro to juggling, and what was it like to go to a juggling fest when you started? So I will first start with you, Mr. Jacob Alex Dyer.
Got it. Well, I have a couple of things. My how I started juggling, I was about 10 years old, and I remember picking up rolled up socks in my bedroom as a kid, and then of course I think it was 4 or 5 different copies of the Klutz book made their way to me on birthdays and holidays. And I was really a solitary juggler for probably 10 years or something like that until college, and then started 2 clubs actually in college, a city club and then a canvas club at SUNY Albany. The fest situation is actually an interesting one for me. The one and only IJA fest I've ever been to is the one in 2018. And that was the one where I got this award, this teaching juggling award. So I don't have maybe some of the same experience that some other people do of going to multiple fests like that. Walking into that festival, I certainly saw the world of juggling for the pretty monotone place it is. But that's I had come from, of course, the Bryant Park group is kind of wildly diverse. There's just people from everywhere and every shade and every continent. So that's my story with fests anyway. Yeah.
Excellent. So when you talk about Bryant Park being wildly diverse, that's a reflection of New York City. But can you talk a little bit about your experience with Bryant Park compared to your experience at your first fest?
Sure. The experience at Bryant Park is, of course, it's a block from Grand Central Terminal. It's 2 blocks from Times Square. It's literally right between those two, actually, right? So you get people just on their way from, going to see Times Square, going to see a show, going whatever, from, like I said, 130 countries around the world. I started to kind of put together a list at one point. At one point, I was always saying to people, more than 60 countries. And then one day I sat down with a list. I worked in international education for about 10 years. So my geography is pretty good. And I remember these things. And yeah, got that actual crazy list together. So the people who would take part in the juggling, I always say, they're self-selecting, right? So you have this very wholesome, fun, very involved activity. People, you need to talk to people. If you're like, if you're a jerk, if you're sort of a negative person who doesn't like people, you're not going to approach this situation. So I always say approximately 100% of the people who we interact with, we're awesome people, just because that's the sort of person who would stop and be interested. But also, they, just because of the fact that New York is New York, they came from everywhere, right? We had people from just everywhere. So that's the real main difference, I guess, is that people were absolute beginners. That was really the main difference, right, between the crowd at the park and the crowd at a fest. Absolute beginners. We taught more than 5,000 people the basic cascade in 10 years, issuing a little pin that says, "I learned to juggle at Bryant Park." So I suppose that would be the main difference, is that sort of a self-selecting and very diverse crowd.
Cool. So Sam, I'd like to throw this to you in terms of, let's talk about where you're from, your intro to juggling, followed by what it was like at your first fest.
Absolutely. Well, so I grew up on the reservation, and that was just kind of where I was at. I kind of had a similar upbringing to you, I think, Paris, like we've talked about that, where things aren't always as great. You just get kind of desensitized to it, and I got into some trouble with things. But I actually started not with juggling. When I was like 15 or 16, I learned how to do poi. And I thought that was really interesting and really cool, and probably surprising to people who that I'm a juggler now. But I did that for a few years, and I would go to parties and do glow sticks and stuff like that. And that was just kind of a thing that I would do. And it was fun. And some of my other friends did it back home, like on the res. And then after I graduated high school, I was really trying to clean up my act a little bit. I was trying to get out of some of the things that were more troublesome. And I saw a guy juggling 5 torches at a Sonic drive-in, like the fast food restaurant. I hired this guy to juggle 5 torches. And I went over and I started talking to him. And it was this guy, CJ Smith, who is a very good juggler, like very, very good, trained with Anthony Gatto, very good. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. I'd love to learn how to do this. I do fire point. He's like, oh yeah, I'll teach you how to juggle. So then he taught me how to juggle. I got really motivated by it because he told me all these stories of all these amazing performers and all these things that you can see if you go to these festivals and stuff. And I had no idea. I'd never heard of any of this. So I got really into juggling. I checked out some books from the library, and I just kind of taught myself. And then, I started teaching all my friends back home too. Like the town that I'm from is actually about 10 miles from the reservation that I lived on. So I'd go to town to go to the library, and then I would go back home and I would hang out with my friends, and I go like, oh, I'll teach you guys how to juggle. So we all learned how to juggle, and I taught my sister how to juggle, and like we're all kind of practicing this thing. And then actually, I didn't mention this before, but I live in Denver now. And around that time, I ended up moving because I couldn't find a job. It was around the time of the economic downturn. Like I wasn't really having too great of success living at home because I was still trapped into a lot of the things that were the like negative influences of my life. And getting a job is very difficult in that area if you're from the reservation, sometimes especially, because there are some racial implications. People don't want to hire you, people don't want to give you work, things like that. And I wanted to be a performer, I decided. So I was like, I'm going to move, I'm going to do that. So I moved away. I started practicing juggling constantly. I wanted to get as good as CJ. I wanted to be as, you know, as good as the people that I had seen in all these videos, but I never met a juggler until I went to the Boulder Juggling Club. So I go to the Boulder Juggling Club and I meet everybody there. I meet Warren Hammond, and at the time Tom Wall was out here, and I became really good friends with Tom, and me and him started practicing a lot together. We ended up getting a job at a summer camp together as juggling instructors. And I didn't really understand how involved he was in the community at the time either. So he left partway through so he can go to IJA, and he's like, oh, you got to go next year. You got to go next year. So I made that my goal. I was going to practice. I was going to go meet other jugglers. I went to festivals, and I'd say that I never really differentiated the culture shock the same way from going to festivals, because so much of the culture shock was just uniform all around for me. Like the lifestyle and the way it is to live on the reservation is so different from what I describe it to people as it's just so outside of the realm of what regular Western culture is, that everything was very strange to me. I didn't really pick apart that it was that juggling was different or the community was different, because it was all very difficult for me for quite a while. I had a very hard time making friends. I had a very hard time meeting people. Dating was very difficult because of the social cues that you get from dating on the reservation, and our culture being more like matriarchal still. So that was very strange. And then, you know, time passes. I keep practicing juggling. I'm really into this. I start making friends. And I'd say something that really stood out, though, that fit with more of the culture shock of realizing that this was something within the community that I was uncomfortable with, but was still somewhat internal, was the first IJI I went to happened to be in Sparks, Nevada. And Sparks is about an hour from the reservation I grew up on. And there is actually a Reno Sparks. They call it the Indian Colony. This is what they call themselves. But the reservation in Sparks is about 5 miles away from the casino where the convention was being held. And I remember walking into the convention and trying to meet people and looking around and getting to know people, and just feeling a little bit uncomfortable with, again, you know, the monotone nature of things. And it's not that there was no diversity in the community, but I was the only one from my community that was at this convention that was functionally taking place within my community. So this is taking place within like land that I have relatives on, that I have family on. And then I convinced my sister, my younger sister, I was like, oh, you got to come up at least for a little bit, you know, I'll bring you up. So I bring her up for a day, and she sees the juggling festival, and she had kind of the same view of that. And she was like more sheltered into like, you know, she hadn't ever gotten to really leave the res yet. She was a lot younger than me. So this was all kind of new. And it was mostly like, well, me and you can hang out. And she got to know people and she kind of made friends, but she was also uncomfortable in that. And we talked about that a little bit too. But, you know, I still tried to take part. I still was like, well, I want to be here. I want to juggle. That was the thing I was passionate about. Performing was the thing that I was passionate about. And, you know, I kept doing it, but then going to each consecutive festival and realizing that like, this is kind of strange, that it's like, there's not really as much of the inclusiveness, you know, like we've gone to all these different places, and, you know, and a lot of towns, like the way, I guess, like, not to generalize, but in my experience, the way other natives are in reservations, like you have family in other towns that you're vaguely related to. So I'd see people in other towns, so I'd go like, yeah, I'm out here. They'd be like, I don't really want to go to that. And realizing that some of it was because they're kind of like, yeah, this is a little not our thing. We don't really feel welcome here. And it wasn't that I didn't feel welcome, but I didn't always ever feel the same way as other people. I'd get a lot more uncomfortable.
That's really interesting that you said that, Sam, because feeling welcome isn't necessarily, or not feeling welcome isn't necessarily where someone outright tells you you're not welcome here. But
Absolutely.
there is a difference in terms of when you are at a place and you feel you feel something that doesn't add things that you're familiar with to you, but it feels like everybody else has that, like everybody else feels like this is their natural habitat. It caters to them, but it kind of makes you feel left out. So I'd love to hear what Shavela has to say about this, considering, of course, you said you're not just a Black person, but you're also a woman, and here you are at a juggling fest.
Yeah, I've had a lot of instances at Juggling Fest where that happens. You know, I call it othering. Absolutely. The first fest I ever went to, I was lucky enough to go to the Atlanta Jugglers Fest for my first festival. And that was in 2001. And when we had connected before, I kind of told you all, you know, I didn't know much about juggling. I was a 3-ball juggler at the time that I went to the festival, and I'd been taught to juggle by an exchange student. So he kind of told me, hey, you're going to love this. There's a group of jugglers. It's amazing. And so I went, and everyone I went with were dudes, and they were all white. And then we get there. But the crowd in Atlanta was absolutely more diverse. But the thing that sticks out in my memory about even going to the fest is that I lived in Florida and traveled to Georgia for the festival. And, you know, part of that othering experience is the fact that if you're not Black, then you don't have a hard of a time to get to the fest. Whereas I had a difficult time even getting to my first fest because my brother had just been brutally beaten by the police, and my parents, even 20 years ago, of course, like the tensions were so high. So my first fest almost didn't happen because, you know, I'm a Black woman and my parents were terrified, even though I was, you know, 19, to send me, you know, to let me go to a festival. It wasn't until like 2011 or 12 that I actually went to my first IJA festival. And I wish Sky was here because it's my favorite thing about going to that festival is that I had never met another Black woman juggler. And she wasn't at that festival either, but someone had come up to me and asked me, hey, are you Sky? And it was at that moment that I knew there was another Black woman juggler out there just by them asking, you know, and it did kind of sting that they thought I was Sky because it meant there were so few of us that, you know, the people at the festival could pick us out. And so since then, of course, we've built an amazing community, and most of that is online because we aren't at festivals. I'm at the festival. I've, you know, plugged myself in there. I have taken over registration. I was on the board. And it is still one of those situations where I go to festivals and people ask to touch my hair. And just from the ignorance of the folks that have not been around other cultures, they don't realize the implication of one person asking to touch my hair equals 50 people to me because it keeps going. It doesn't stop, you know, the first time. And so those experiences are definitely othering. And the only way for people to know is to do what we're doing here, is speak up on it.
And Shavela, I think that's great that you mentioned that, especially the part with Sky King, because there are people to this day who still believe that Sky King is my mother. And it was to the point where we eventually just stopped correcting people, where people go, hey, Sky, so I saw your son earlier. I can't find him anymore more. Where is he? And she'd just go, he's over there. And that's it. It's one of those things where because there's so few of us, and because we often have a population at these juggling fests that aren't used to interacting with Black people this much, that you have these actions that, of course, you and I would never experience where we're from. But it's just, we're constantly dealing with that there. I do want to throw it back to you because you said which was it's a horrible thing to hear, but you said that your brother was beaten by the police, and it because of that, your first fest almost didn't happen. Were you able to? Did you feel like you were able to talk to anybody about that once you got to the fest?
No. However, in years since then, I have absolutely built a juggling family where I can bring those things, and I do have a support system. But what Sam said resonated with me so much, because most of the reaching out has come from me. You know, I learned to pass clubs to make friends. And when Sam was saying, you know, like he and his sister hung out and were trying to make friends, when you are the different person, it makes more sense for the majority to reach out to you. And that's not something that I've ever experienced at IJA specifically. And I would say, like, for me, I have a personality where I can put that aside and I will make friends regardless. However, if people are more shy and come from different cultures, it's not just being Black, but even just the cultural aspect, I think it's more, the onus is more on the majority to make the minority feel seen, safe, and heard.
I think that's a really important thing to point out. I myself can relate to that as well. I was always someone who was much more outgoing. They know us from Harlem. We can talk up a storm, no problem. But in that respect, because there was a shortage of Black jugglers at my first IJA, and then I learned later that that was normal. I did later on understand that if I didn't come out and speak, then I'm not sure if many people would have spoken to me. In addition, I do want to say that it did feel kind of awkward how race was handled at my first IJA. I grew up in Harlem, and it was a circus program where nearly everybody in that program was Black. We avoided juggling like a plague because it was the most anti-Black thing that we could do. So we thought. I came in as an acrobat and then later on transitioned to trapeze. For 3 years, I didn't want to touch juggling. Juggling wasn't cool. Juggling didn't get you any girls. And juggling was for clowns is what I thought. And the rest of us thought that too. But then thank goodness by 12 years old, I was transitioned to the in-school program, where it was a performing arts school that had a circus program embedded in it. So yes, I went to circus school. And we were graded on it the same way we were graded on math and science. And we would have shows throughout the school year. And this new juggling teacher, Russell Davis, who was a phenomenal juggler. There's an article in the old Juggle magazine that lists him as one of the best jugglers you've never heard of. But what he said was, you can make juggling what you want. And we didn't believe him. He said, I don't want to juggle, why not? Well, this juggling's for clowns. I'm not a clown. Well, I don't want to wear stupid shoes. You don't have to wear stupid shoes. Well, I don't want to play stupid music. You don't have to play stupid music. You play whatever you want. Just learn the basics. So then we challenged him. We said, can we play our rap music in the back? Sure. Can we wear Air Jordans? Sure. So then in 6 months.
Just not the Black ones.
Exactly. But in 6 months, there was a stage outside of our school, and we had a performance. It was a bunch of Black kids from Harlem passing clubs, juggling with Dr. Dre in the back, and all of us wearing flat sneakers on. So because juggling was introduced to me as something that's relatable to my culture, and I don't want to make it sound like it's something where, you know, we have to learn every culture on the globe, but Black American culture is still American. It shouldn't feel foreign to people, in my opinion, but it kind of is treated as foreign. And at my first IJA, I was about 14 years old, and it felt like race was something that they did not want to talk about. And you being racist and saying, I don't want X here is one thing. But if you're having a shortage and you want to address this shortage, And finally, on their own accord, this person with this shortage who addresses the shortage comes in. You would expect that that definitely be highlighted, mentioned for sure. But it was more, let's avoid it. And the opposite happened when a newspaper stopped by. While the IJA put me in their magazine with a few lines about just all the kids juggling who were good, the Associated Press came and they did a full feature on me. They made it just about me. And they contacted every Black juggler out there in that convention, including Henry Radcliffe, including Tony Flowers. And they're like, what do you think about this kid? And they wrote that up, including quotes from the sky. And apparently that mattered. If that mattered to the Associated Press, and later that mattered to the Today Show, I thought that should have definitely mattered to the IJA. And I definitely feel like there is some improvement. There's lots of improvement in terms of how we handle race as we address improving our diversity numbers, especially now more than ever that in our IJA Juniors competition, we had a phenomenal competitor that blew us away. And she's not going away. And I really hope that that will help blossom the art form and the community. With that being said, we've talked a lot about reaching out. We talked about reaching out to different cultures, different people. And how do you think the IJA itself can improve its outreach or do more outreach? And we don't want to single out the IJA as the reason why there's not enough outreach, but with the name of the IJA and with the respect that it has in our community, there's a great opportunity for the IJA to really have an impact and lead the culture. So I'm gonna start actually with Sam. What do you think the IJA can do in terms of outreach when it comes to its diversity numbers at its convention, and furthermore, in American juggling?
Well, I could really only speak for my experience and my group, obviously. But my opinion on this is it felt to me a lot like there's always a focus on, well, how do we bring juggling to people by how do we get them to see our shows? How do we get those people to watch us perform? And then to me, that always felt like more, how do we use this community rather than how do we take part in this community that we want to share juggling with? And I think that the main focus is just looking at how do you take part in a community? I can speak for my community. The way you take part is, you email the council, you email somebody at on the the tribal chairman, you email somebody on the council, you email somebody with one of the board's education department, something like that, and you just say hey, we want to share some information with you on teaching juggling. We know that you probably have an after-school program or some kind of schooling program, and if you're interested, we are happy to provide that to you so that you can teach people within your community how to juggle. We just want to give you that. I think that's a good step. And I think that's important because then it becomes more about, and not to say that, it can't go both ways. It's definitely a communication. It's definitely something that there needs to be a flow back and forth. But this makes the IJA more about how do we give something to these communities rather than being expectant of what the communities can give us. And that might be a little bit harder for people to hear, but it does seem to me a lot of times that when the IJA goes to these towns, we have a big festival, it's always about what does this town offer the IJA? What restaurants do we have here? What hotels do we have? What can we give the jugglers? And I think that is very important. We need to find a way to, make it a little bit even, but we also need to look at, well, if we want people within this community to come to our shows, we want people within this community to take part in our festival, we want them to really care and see how cool juggling can be. What are we doing as jugglers? What are we doing as an organization? What are we doing to reach out to that community? And my personal experience with this is, I try to spread juggling wherever I go. I try to give that to people. I teach kids on my reservation how to juggle still. I spent a couple months back home after I moved because I ran into some issues with basically corrupt police who didn't want to let me leave. And I was stuck back on the reservation, except I was a juggler and I wanted to be performing, but I couldn't leave. And I took that time to, well, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to practice juggling and I'm going to do it. And the kids are going to see it and I'm going to offer to do shows. But if they just want to learn, I'll just let them learn. I'll show them how to do it. I'll share it with them. And today still, like, I talk about these things in my shows, but I try to spread that to people when I go to other communities. And I go to other Native communities that aren't even just from my tribe as well. Like, I perform for other Natives. I've gone to powwows and I teach people how to juggle. I was out at Standing Rock for the protest, for the pipeline protests that everybody saw in the news. And that was for the children. That was all for, we need to protect the water for the kids, for the future, for the next generation. And when I was packing up to go, I went, you know, I wouldn't do this for any other reason, but I'm going to take juggling with me. I'm going to take some of my props. I'm going to find a way to do a show for those kids. I don't care about everybody else. I'm not going to go because they need to see me. I'm going to go because there are kids out there that need to know that people care and that people want to share something cool with them. And I did that. I performed at the Sacred Fire. I juggled knives, you know, it wasn't anything real fancy or special, but people liked it. And afterwards, there were a lot of kids that came up and they went, oh, you know, I want to learn how to juggle. Teach me how to juggle. How did you do that? How long have you been doing that? That's so cool. They had never seen anything like that. And to me, it was less about giving them a show and trying to give them something that they would be inspired by, that, like, you know, there's not just running, there's not just basketball, there's other things you could do that are fun, there's other skills that you could learn, and you could make this your own thing. And I know a lot of them still juggle. Like, I talked to some of those people still, and I gave them props, I gave them whatever I could, but trying to provide that for the community, to me, feels more important. And I think that the IJA has the capabilities to provide these things for a community, to give them to a community that it goes into, rather than trying to take things out of the community to make the festival better. Like, we can put a lot more into it.
Man, I am itching to hear what Alex says in response to this, in response to what Sam said, because Alex, once again, he talked about outreach. Sam talked about outreach. He talked about and specifically targeting the community, figure out what you can do for the community. At the same time, Alex, you've taught thousands of people how to juggle right in the heart of New York City. And what you said, and I've seen it myself, people who look all kinds of ways, all kinds of different cultures. And you guys do that at no cost to the public. So I want to hear your, if there's anything you want to say in regards to what Sam said, in addition to anything else that you want to point out in regards to outreach involving.
You know, first off, I cannot agree with Sam more. I think that, you know, it's almost like, you know, I think about the seasons, you know, as one festival is happening, right, you should be like working. So the fest happens in July. You should, by August of the same year, you should have an active team in next year's city. You know what I'm saying? Like, doing something at least, getting it rolling, getting in touch with gym teachers, phys ed, you know, programs in schools. You know, I'm not going to say most, but many schools have, you know, the circus unit in gym, you know, and just even as simple as advertising the fact that this festival is going to be here next year, you know, and we have 20 free tickets or something, you know, that's something I think the IJA can do. That's one concrete thing I think that can happen, is, you know, to pull in a certain number, who knows, you know, how you figure that out, but a certain number of sort of, you know, invitations from people in the community, children in the community, to come and see this thing that, for most people in Springfield in 2018, I'm sure a lot of people, when they saw the people, you know, the clown cars coming in, said, what is going on? I had no idea, what is this? And then it was a week and then they were gone. You know, if they had a little more advance notice, would be fantastic. I think that's really something that that we could work with. you know, and I'm not sure, again, that some of that may already be being done. Paris, do you know anything about that, or Shavela, or anyone?
Shavela will be the more knowledgeable voice in that front, but I still want to get you to complete your thought, and
Yes.
then I want to hear
sure,
a lot
sure.
from
No,
Shavela.
you know, I don't want to say that nothing's happening because I don't really know. But that seems like a real great opportunity for us. And your question about Bryant Park and the what was that question again, Paris?
At Bryant Park,
yes,
because Sam talked about reaching out to community, providing a service, as
yes,
opposed to having the community come and serve your initiative. Your initiative at Bryant Park in New York City is all about reaching out to the community. The community
right.
doesn't pay a single cent, and they can get free juggling instruction.
That's
from
right. That's
people
right.
happy to be there with good, and there's no with good experience, and there's no barrier to entry. So based on your experience,
Right.
what can you say involving when it comes to your spin on how Bryant Park's outreach is a good example of how you can help?
Okay, so the real thing, it goes back to the very, very beginning, right? Of that program. It was me juggling by myself in the fall of 2009. I started juggling there over my lunch breaks. Spring of 2010, I started going every day at noon, and just consistency, being out there. I think that's a big piece of it. Just being out there, being consistent. I had my own equipment for the first year and a half. Every day, people started joining me. We had maybe 10, 15 people in that first summer, at the end of that first summer, through that first winter. After about a year and a half, the management up on the 24th floor of the building right next door came down and said, you know, we've seen what you've been doing for the last 18 months every day. Do you want to be paid for it and be a part of it? I said, let me think about that. Not at all. Yes. And you know, that's really the thing is putting yourself in a good place, right? I think that's important. Putting yourself in a park. I think putting yourself outside in a park. I think those are two key things. And also this is important, having a culture of teaching. Okay, and this is something that we carefully cultivated at the park. Anybody who's juggling, again, we have a lot of hardcore people, you know, crazy passing patterns and whatnot, but almost anyone, to a person, if a teacher is needed, drop and go, you know. And that's something that we've tried to really encourage. So consistency, always being a teacher, not necessarily a performer showing, but you know, teaching. I would say those are some of the highlights.
Excellent. And I do want to say I've seen it myself. I volunteered for you guys myself at Bryant Park. The community that you guys built there, the juggling community you guys built there from scratch, is inspiring because the people come from all walks of life, and all of them found their own way or their own reason to get into juggling. And what you guys did worked, so that's great. Now, Shavela, I'm gonna pass it on to you. Once again, we're talking about outreach and how the IJA can help, whether it's through the organization or its members itself. I'm gonna pass it on to you, and also feel free to comment on anything that Sam or Alex has mentioned as well.
Sure. Well, I think what comes up for me with the IJA specifically is that since I have gone, it is very male and white male dominant. And when I think about that and outreach, the first thing that comes to mind to me is that the IJA got that way somehow. So going back to the beginning, why is it that way? Already, it's just very white male centered. And then what needs to happen is there's a power dynamic when you're the majority to be able to give space to others. And that is what is really needed, right? Like the people in power, the people that are the majority, have to step aside and make space and specifically say, hey, we're having a show and we want performers, and we're going to seek out a diverse panel of performers until that panel is diverse. We're not going to just pick the great performers that we know. The work actually has to be done to go out and seek that. And that's uncomfortable. I'm sure it's easier for you to pick who you know and say, yes, I know this great juggler. He's a white dude and he's awesome. I'm going to put him in the show because he's going to be solid. But it takes more work to go in and say, I need women in my show. I need a diverse representation of genders in my show. I need a diverse representation of people in my show, age, ageism, ableism, all of those things. And that is where it starts. It starts where the IJA started. And I would have to ask David Kane, but I'm pretty sure that I'm the first Black board member in the 70 plus years of the organization. That's a long time to not have a voice. And that's where it starts for me. The outreach starts within the members, making space and being accessible to those folks who don't have that access. I am lucky that my husband is willing to stay home and watch the kids or grab the kids for me at a fest. But as a mother, it would be an impossibility for me to enjoy the festival with my children because of the culture that is the IJA currently.
Okay, so Shavela, I do want to point out one thing that you said in terms of making sure that you have enough diversity in your shows, or in our juggling shows. A counter argument to that would be, now we're not looking out for the best jugglers out there. We're decreasing the quality to fill in these diversity boxes. Before, we used to just find the best, and now we're picking from this box, picking from that box, when there are great jugglers out there that we're excluding. I'm sure you heard that argument before. I've heard that argument, but I want you to sort of kind of provide an answer to that from your perspective.
Yeah, my perspective is absolutely that is seen through a filter of a white gaze, right? It's like, if you see something that is different, it is, what comes to mind is the first time we had the flow show at the Juggling Fest, and even I was sitting there like, what is going on? But the fact that I was exposed to it, it enriched even my juggling. And different isn't worse. And that's my answer, is that what is the gauge of what's better and what's best? People have to be mindful of what filter and what gaze they're looking at that through. And if that filter is of a majority gaze of what they're already used to, then broadening their horizons to really acknowledge everything that's out there. Because we know, especially just doing this festival online this year, seeing people perform from different countries and the absolute diversity even in the performances, it can't be measured by better, best, worse. It's just so different that it all should be included.
Thanks, Shavela, for pointing that out. I'm really glad that you are definitely willing to drop that, in terms of, because that's an argument that's so casually said in not just juggling, but in many different art forms. But the people who say that don't have access to people who aren't them. So here's a great opportunity to explain that. Thank you so much, Shavela. With that being said, in terms of diversity in the shows, I've been a professional juggling performer for 12 years. And the first time, I wasn't the only Black person in a juggling show as a professional. Try to think, in my 12 years, when was the first? Last year, when I did the Austin, Texas Juggling Festival, and Salih Muhammad was also on the roster, my man. But it was cool because it was what the audience got to see was Blackness expressed through juggling, but in different varieties of it. He's East African. I'm a Black American. Our takes are going to be different. His act was very East African. His act was very specifically Ethiopian in terms of the style and flair that he had. But it's still Black culture expressed. My act was a Black American act, hip hop music, Black cultural references in the United States, basketballs, but it was still a representation. I think one mistake that we constantly make is that we give the diversity box to one person. Well, we got a woman. Well, we got a person of color, and there shouldn't be a diversity box. We shouldn't be scrapping for that one spot. Another thing is that you have an art form expressed in one way, and let's say I hire one woman. It's not enough that's not the woman's representation. That's a woman's representation. I can put more women in my show. I can put more blank in my show. And oftentimes what we see is we have tons of diversity. We have this person from Uganda, and it's like, yeah, but you're performing in front of a group in the Bronx. I mean, Uganda is nice, but they're Americans. They'd like something also that caters to them specifically. Now, don't take the Ugandan guy out. That guy earned it. But we also want just to throw a little bit more in terms of other things that meet them where they are. And with Sam, I'd like to point out what you said about specifically targeting those neighborhoods. I fully agree. When you watch TV, what you see is targeted ads. So when you see a Burger King commercial, when you're watching Modern Family, it's not the same Burger King commercial that they play during the NBA. They cater to the audience that they're trying to get. And lastly, I wanna go into color blindness. Throughout popular culture, we've gotten addicted to believing that color blindness is the cure for all. But in our spaces, that's not how we operate. We're constantly discussing things that work for different communities, especially when it comes to the problems that need to be solved and how to solve them. When, in my opinion, when you're saying, don't bring race into it, why are you bringing race into it? You're creating racism. Really what you're saying is, I want to be blind to issues that affect this community specifically, or I want to be blind to concepts that recruit this community specifically. So if you send a colorblind advertisement of your show without any context of people who don't look like the people who are making the ad, it's going to almost certainly attract the people who look like the people who are making the ad, which means that when it comes to draw back to what Sam said, to draw back what Alex said, when it comes to how we recruit and how we reach out, how we address our shortages in certain areas, we need more than just, we put a bunch of flyers in this place. We went to this Boys and Girls Club. We want to bring representatives who look like the people that are part of that community. We want to have those people involved in the creation of the marketing. And at the same time, we also want to listen to what those people have to say when it comes to reaching out to their community. We don't have enough of that, I feel, in juggling. And I think the IJA is in a unique position because it's our national body, and in many cases our international body. It can really help shape the culture. So I think that's great what you guys have said. I love the fact that everybody had their own idea of where they were coming from with this, which I think is great. Pretty soon we're going to start our question and answer session, and with that we're going to open it up for questions. You guys can write, if you guys are on Zoom, you can write in your questions. We'll pick them, and I'll bring it to our panelists. But with that being said, is there anything else, maybe a 1-minute statement that anybody would like to add before we break it out into questions? Okay, I will go to Sam.
I will do my best to make this succinct. I just wanted to add on to the color blindness statement. And if anybody else feels like they need to say anything, like please, like I don't want to take all the rest of the time with this. I can speak for the I can speak for the Native experience in this. And the idea of color blindness is, to Natives, a part of the genocide that is ongoing. This is not something that has ended. This is not something that has gone away. This is not something that is ancient history. And frequently it is talked about as if it is ancient history. Like even right now, you know, last night I said something in the Renegade trying to make a call to action of people like, I want you to acknowledge the land. And the amount of people that thought that I meant I need them to tell me, I know, I want you to tell your friends. But then even then within this, the amount of posts that I see and the amount of stuff, and this is not to attack anybody, this is just to point out that how many of your biases are based off of these are things within the past. So there's kind of a part of colorblindness that lends itself to all of that is over, so quit talking about it because we want to talk about now, but it's now, it is right now. Like when I talk about things that are going on with Native communities, mine, others, my families, my relatives, my friends, I mean those things right now. I don't mean those things later. When and that's going on exactly right now with everybody. You know, you want to talk about Black Lives Matter? Like that is something going on right now. Our movement has been Standing Rock, it's been Land Back, it's been Native Lives Matter. And those are things that are going on right now. And then to me, what's important, a way that the IJA specifically can take part in that for this group, for the group that I am, I guess, representing, is thinking about the fact that it's an international association, but it's based in the United States. And what are you doing for the people that were here first? And not to say it like, you know, what are you doing? Get out of your houses, give them back. But because that's how people always hear that, right? They always hear it like, you're telling me you want your land back, we gave you land, but that's not how it is. It's, why don't you look at the people that are from there, whose culture today they're still holding on to, they're still making survive, that have a connection to the land where you built a building, and all you have to do is say, hey, you are welcome here. We want to make sure that your voice is heard. We want to make sure your culture is represented because we are having it on your land. We're having it on land that you identify with. We're going to acknowledge that. If you want to say a prayer over the land before our show, we would love that. We want to involve you in this because we are in a place that you have a connection to that we might not completely understand, but we want to represent. We want to take part in. And it's like this for, I think, every culture really is like, if you go into a place and the culture is different, is it correct for you to say, well, they should all kind of, you know, this is how I do things? No. Like if I go to Harlem, I've gone to Harlem, I've seen Paris, we walk around. Exactly.
We did.
Yeah, we did. And he showed me all the stuff there, and it was different from anything I experienced growing up. And I just ask, you know, like, hey, could you tell me about this? What's this place? What's this? What did it mean to you? Tell me about your experiences growing up. And that to me seems like a much larger scope, but we should bring it in. We should go, well, what's your experience, but also who are the people here? What is this culture here? How are we taking part in that? Is what we're doing respectful? I could think of lots of microaggressions that I hear from performers, lots of things that kind of perpetuate this idea of that's all in the past. And comments that I've gotten that make me uncomfortable to talk to people about my history, my culture, and also seeing it for other people as well. So I just want to add that on, that like we should talk about that.
I think I'll make one comment and then I actually really want to hear Shavela's response to this. When it comes to what you talked about, Sam, it definitely sounds, it's part of the othering that Shavela mentioned earlier. But then it also ties into what I said about, you know, poorly handling race. Now, I'm getting the vibe from you that you're not really asked very often about where you are, what is it about you, Sam, as a native, as a human being? And I feel the same way. Now, of course, in a juggling community, we've benefited a lot from the idea that anybody from any walk of life can walk into your local juggling club, and everybody throws aside any of their beliefs or anything like that, and just focuses on the juggling and will teach you juggling. And that's excellent, and that's a wonderful part of our culture. At the same time, though, there are realities that people of color deal with. There are reasons why there are less of us in one spot. Things like economics, where, for instance, you know, you want me to fly to IJA, or you want more Black people at IJA? Well, the average Black family has a 10th of the net worth of the average white family. So when you're asking someone to get on an airplane and fly, or you're asking someone to spend $40 on each club, you're asking for a whole lot more than you're thinking. And if you're not talking to the people, and you're not familiarizing yourself with these difficult conversations, then you're not allowing yourself to address these things. So I definitely feel a need to try to avoid these tough conversations, and at the same time, we want to supposedly solve these issues. I feel like you can't have both, but Shavela, I'm curious to know what you're thinking about this.
I think the difficult conversations have to happen. I also think that people need to stop being afraid of making mistakes, especially when speaking to POC, Black people, that sort of thing. Yes, there are microaggressions, but what comes to mind more than any of that is the responsibility that the majority has to talk to one another about those things. And that is what I don't see. I see when we congregate in a place that the people who are other together, right? They group up together. And if something racist happens to me at a juggling festival, more often than not, the response will be like, oh man, I saw that happen to you, or someone touched your hair. And less often I will see someone come up and be like, hey, don't touch Black women's hair. That's like very wrong. So I think that the fear of doing or saying something wrong is absolutely the roadblock that's keeping people from moving forward with those conversations.
Excellent. Thank you, Shavela. I will now start looking at some of your questions. One is specifically for me, but I feel like I've quite a bit. Okay, so I do want to point out, you know, I will answer this question. One person wants to know, and this is, I hope I'm getting this right, Aileen. Thank you, Aileen wants to know that, wants to hear more about specifically my outreach to children, and is it uncool to juggle once they see me? The answer is, it is not. Juggling actually becomes cool when they see me. It's oftentimes that I'm hired to fly to different places because they want to improve their diversity numbers at their show, or they want to inspire students at their circus program, etc. And I have a lot of experience with that. I come from an outreach program myself, where we reached out to the community, and at the same time, I worked in the outreach program that I came from. My first circus job was working with the Apple Circus, where we primarily hit underprivileged kids in Harlem, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, South Bronx. Right now, I'm teaching a virtual circus program in a place called The Point in Hunts Point, the Bronx, where it's the poorest district in the United States, and you don't get those kinds of numbers in those communities unless you actually address what's wrong there. But if you want to avoid these questions, if you want to avoid these topics, then you avoid those communities. So I do want to point out to Alex, I want to get your opinion on what you've seen, because you've seen so many different people. You taught juggling. Have you seen any differences in juggling when you go to a convention in the United States? It is overwhelmingly white. And if you were to look at it, you would swear that there's something about white Americans that makes them succeed in juggling. But you, Alex, have taught in Bryant Park, you've taught practically everyone who looks like everyone. What can you say about what the response that you got from the different people that you've taught, and the achievements that they were able to get upon learning? What was it like in terms of their ability to learn, their ability to succeed in juggling?
Right. Well, I would definitely say that trying to keep my little competition here for sound in the house.
Relatable content,
right,
Alex.
right,
very
right,
relatable.
Right. I mean, one thing I would have to say is most of the interactions that we have with people are one-offs. You know, they come by, they're on their way to a Broadway show, or they're, when are you leaving? I always make a joke, but when are you leaving? Oh, we're on our way to the airport. I say, oh, please, there's another plane leaving tomorrow. Come on, come and juggle with us tomorrow. So there isn't really a whole lot of follow-up, I would say, in probably, 9 out of 10 people who we teach, it's the one time that we saw them, It's a great memory for them. It's some great pictures. We meet people, but then they're gone, right? However, that 1 out of 10 who are local, you see some situations and some people, just situations that just give you such a restore my faith in humanity and parenting. Like I see. There was this one woman who came to the park, Black woman, 3 sons there. They came, they learned how to juggle with us. They came back. We became a regular stop on their like life as school kind of thing the mother was doing. All 3 of these kids playing string instruments. They had their cases with them. Mother bought all 3 of them Diablos. They're doing all this stuff. So I think that the culture of teaching really helped encourage them and get that going. But beyond that, also the other thing I was thinking about the people who really stick around. A couple of minutes ago, I started writing down a list of regulars at Bryant Park over the years, really regulars, people who really stayed. And I think I have about 35 names here. And those are people, these are people who could be called on to be part of some sort of outreach and program. What are you talking about? People who look like people that we're trying to attract.
So that's cool. And because you taught so many different kinds of people, I definitely feel it's worth talking about your background, because in terms of American juggling, the population that you teach is atypical. It's what it reflects more what New York City looks like, and of course that requires some comfort. So let's talk about your background as a human being.
That's so I'm half black and half white. My father is from Jamaica, and my mother passed away 3 years ago, but she was about as white as a person could possibly be, like Mayflower stock. So I had a wonderful opportunity just after finishing college. I went to school in SUNY Albany for music and history. Just after I graduated, I joined the Peace Corps. I had an opportunity to live to go somewhere in the Peace Corps. I thought, where am I going to go? They gave us options, Central America, co-ops, business development in Eastern Europe. agroforestry in West Africa. I said, let me do that. So I lived in the Gambia, West Africa for 4 years. So I stayed for 2 years and then added 2 years on top of that.
Wow.
Dealt with, got really into languages when I was there. I speak 3 African languages.
So you were the right man for the job over at Bryant Park.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's really funny, you know, like, and occasionally I'll there'll be some tourists from Senegal or the Gambia or Guinea or somewhere, place where people speak the languages that I speak, and I drop right into it with people and they're like, huh? Right? It's very funny. But yes, I think the other thing also is that I worked at Bryant at Berkeley College as a business school in New York and New Jersey for 15 years, working as an academic advisor, and then slowly working my way over to being in the international department, working with like students, student visas, all this thing, until when I left, I was director of international student services for all 8 campuses of the college and online. So I've had a lot of experience with a lot of international just people professionally as well. And it was on my lunch hour from that job for the past 10 years that I was teaching, a paid job on the lunch hour from my other job.
Excellent. This is great. We have a few more questions. There's a person who, and we're getting a lot of questions from people who are looking for help in terms of how they want to get involved, and I think that's great. This whole panel was created because the IJA wanted to give us a platform in terms of figuring out ways that we can help and bring this conversation out to the community. So this is a huge boon, thanks to the IJA. And with that, there's a person who's wondering if, are there ways that they can do outreach in the age of COVID where you can't meet in person? And Shavela wants to get that. I'm gonna let you get on that, Shavela.
Interestingly enough, the age of COVID, in my opinion, has brought about more outreach than I have seen from the IJA in a very long time. When I'm experiencing the fact that we're going to see the IRCs that Aaron has been putting on for years, when I think about the fact that there are breakout sessions of people speaking in different languages and teaching people in different languages, the time of COVID is actually bringing about the most amount of diversity that I have ever seen. And because the internet is accessible and going to a festival is not. So in my brain, it's how do we turn our IJA physical fest to also be this fest that we're having now? Because I've only met Sam in person, and just look at the connection that we have been able to nurture in a few weeks based on this panel. So the age of COVID, to me, it has a lot of negative impact. Here, I think it's absolutely like the most positive thing that's happened in juggling in a very long time.
Excellent, thank you. We're getting a whole lot of questions. It doesn't look like we'll be able to answer all of them, but we're going to do our best. And as we answer more, will obviously come up. We have a little bit over 15 minutes left, but I'm going to try to keep. Going. Now, a number of people have asked a very similar question in terms of what advice would we give to a person who wants to teach in communities or cultures that aren't their own? And I think that's a really important question as we're dealing with the population that's in American juggling versus the population that can really use it, especially when it comes to outreach. Does anybody want to take that question and put a finger up if you do? All right, Sam, you go for it.
I feel like everybody is going to have an answer for this that we're going to cover broadly as well. So definitely don't want to be the only one answering. I think it's really important, if you're going to reach out to the communities, to do so very softly, to do so very gently. And I could think of this again from my community, that like, if just as a basic example, if you are just a kind of white dude from somewhere else who comes out and goes, and not even just a white dude, like I don't want to even, just like if you're somebody who is from outside of a tribal community specifically, but just outside of our culture, and you come in and you're like, hey, I want to teach you how to juggle, there is going to be a view immediately of what does this person want from us, of what does this person expect that we're going to give them, and are they here to take advantage of us? And that, I mean, I can say that that is a very big part of Native communities that everybody is very worried about all the time.
Black community too, no question.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of across the board with different cultures, especially when it's minority cultures. So looking at it from the standpoint of, I want to teach juggling, I want to go out there, well, what resources could I provide first? So it's good if you want to go out there and say, hey, everybody, I'm going to teach you how to juggle. Just show up here. But you should also try to find out, like you should go talk to other people in that community first. Like in my instance, it's, and I'm already working on a project for this too, because I'm connected with those people, but just like, you know, talk to an education department. Is there somebody who lives there that is in education? Well, you can talk to them and say like, hey, I have this thing. I would like to just give you these resources if you want them. And if you're interested, I am more than happy to come out. I'm more than happy to teach. I'm more than happy to demonstrate. But what do you want? How do you want this to be? How do you want this juggling that I am going to present? What do you want it to look like? What does it offer you? And you have to be prepared for some people are going to say, I don't want that at all. This has no value to us. This has no value to our culture, our community. And some people might be aggressive about it, but you kind of have to be willing to put yourself in the position of people just saying no. If you're willing to deal with that rejection, you're already at a good point for, well, they'll probably say yes. You know, like not many people are going to go, I'm really threatened by jugglers. But I think that that's a good starting point, and I hope that's not too vague, because I think that is a pretty dense question as well.
No, definitely. We can all throw in our own tidbits to it. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to what Sam says? 1 minute long, because we want to make sure we fit these questions in. Raise one finger if you want to add anything. Other than that, we'll keep going. All right, Shavela.
I will add in quickly that what Sam said is so true, that there are people already doing outreach into communities where voices need to be heard, and yes, maybe someone needs to learn to juggle. But the other thing is, and I'll just point this out because it's something I saw that I was amazing and I loved it. I'm just going to give Taylor a shout out, because one of the things that I saw Taylor Glenn do is that she highlighted different types of juggling from around the world. And it's that simple. It's that, do you have a Black juggling friend, or have you experienced a Native juggler or performer, and you have the majority voice? Highlight those people. Highlight those people that you find out in the community already, because you already have the platform. And even if it's powwow, even if it is dance, that you're exposing other people, and that is the outreach. When people are seen and heard, they're going to see themselves there.
Great.
1 minute up.
No, I think that's great. I think when it comes down to ways that people can add to it, I think definitely also look out to the juggling representatives of that community. I think oftentimes there are people who want to do outreach, they're not from that community, and they think they got it, and they'll just go out there and not talk to anyone. I know for certain, if I wanted to reach out to young women who wanted to juggle, I'm not doing squat without calling Sky King, without calling Taylor, without calling Shavela. I'm gonna reach out to the people who know more about that community than I do. And I think we make a lot of mistakes thinking that we know it all when we're not part of it, because there might be things that we could miss. With that being said, oh wow, this one, I definitely wanna point this one out. Someone asked, how do we address vocally racist jugglers who are currently part of our community? And I knew Sam won his hands on that. Let's go, Sam. But here's the deal, Sam. We have less than 10 minutes, so I'm gonna try to hold you to 1 minute of an answer.
It's the one sentence. We curse them out.
All right. This is going to be very tough, and it's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings. You have to exclude those people. You have to tell them what they did wrong, and you have to tell them, no, thank you. You are not welcome here. Because it might seem like you can get through with a reasonable point. It might seem like you can really change their mind, but those people have to want to make that change. And if they are very vocal that they're just going to keep on, you can't save them. And you're only hurting other people by trying and keeping them involved with the community. And that goes for really anybody who is harmful, you know, like we all got to look out for the people who are the most affected by it, the people who are going to be hurt the easiest. And the way you do that is by saying, if you're here to hurt people, you're here to be racist, whatever, like we can't have that.
Well, Sam, one thing that I see constantly online specifically is somebody from that community who's been affected by statements, by the claims of someone who we deem racist. We have a large disagreement over whether that person was racist. And usually that crowd of people who are saying that that person's not racist is overwhelmingly white. And then you have the one minority representative on the other side saying, actually he is, but majority rules, right? That's what, hey, most people think that guy's not racist. It's a misunderstanding, everything's good, right?
That's kind of my experience. And I mean, this is an extreme that I don't like falling into. This is something that I don't like saying like this. And I'm hoping that if you hear it, you understand. But I promise you, if you are a like white person in this country that has never been exposed to like native cultures, you have internalized racism towards those cultures. There's things that you ignore and let slide all the time. And if somebody calls you out for that, you have to just say, hey, I didn't know. And if people aren't willing to just come to that conclusion, and this doesn't apply to just natives, obviously, this applies to everybody. If a black person says to you, that's racist, I feel very uncomfortable, I feel very unsafe about you saying that specifically, you should probably, again, just ask questions. And to me, it all comes back down to like, just ask questions. Like, and I mean, I'm a comic. I say offensive stuff on accident all the time. And then if I find out, I go like, hey, I'm really sorry. Could you tell me what I can do to be better? And I think that is a good step, you know?
It looks like Shavela, you want to add to that. Is that correct? You look like you were looking to add.
Oh, y'all don't want me to add. I curse those people out.
Okay, we'll keep
That's
this
where
one.
I start.
We'll keep this one G-rated then. And Alex, were you all done? Do you want me to move on, or do you want more?
I would just say, you know, it's been a while since I was actually even at that juggling club that I founded myself, right? I stopped working in the city in 2018, 2019, doing a lot of dadding, and I've been working for the Postal Service, actually. But I am just very excited for this initiative and, you know, to be a part of it, because I think we have a deep roster. I think one of the things that the Bryant Park group can actually offer is a lot of, you know, motivated teachers of color of all ages, you know, people who will be glad to join in a way, in a really meaningful way, I believe. So
I think, thank you, Alex. I think what we're a common denominator that we're seeing in this group is dealing with an overwhelmingly white culture that's used to being in overwhelmingly white spaces. So we see a huge disconnect culturally between us and specifically the general consensus of what we see at these conventions. So when we talk about addressing racism or the aggressive non-addressing of racism, what you have is once again, Shavela, what you talked about, that unwelcoming feel of when we call out racism, how we're treated when we do so. And I think that's a big, big, important part in terms of how we properly take care of some of the shortages that we have, specifically when it comes to people who show up at our conventions and our membership. Would anybody like to add to that, or should we move on to the next question? All right.
I think you
Okay.
nailed it. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay. Someone asks, is there something you would say to regional festival organizers or juggling club leaders that you haven't already talked about that may be unique to those organizations? And that's a pretty open question. And I think that's done on purpose. Any recommendations toward the regional fest or the local juggling club leaders that you think can help them out with their initiatives? And you know what, I'm gonna go to Alex for this one, because once again, Alex, your experience with Bryant Park, unique perspective. Let me hear you out.
One thing I would say for sure, again, just goes to location, right? If you're having your this is for like community clubs, right? If you're having your meetings every Thursday in a gym that you need a membership for, you know, down in a block north of Houston Street, it's great, but you're not visible. You're not visible to the community. So the idea of having, I don't know if you call them field trips, rotating where you juggle, especially in the warm season. Just try it. Go outside and juggle, regularly once make one meeting a month or something, in a park, in a place where you want to get people out of the community. That's one definite way that you could that a club could work on getting a more diverse body.
Great. Actually, I'm going to move on to another question I think is really important. Even I know you guys have answers to that question, but this one I think is a unique one that I think is very strong. We have very limited time left. We only have 5 minutes, so let's keep our answers short. But what one person wants to know is, if the goal is to create an organizational culture with a deep shared understanding of racism, where white people are committed to holding themselves accountable, and we're naming racism and other oppression when it comes out as encouraged and not avoided, what groundwork would you recommend the organization and or individuals do before recruiting people of color? And I'm gonna go to Shavela for this one, based on your experience as a leader within the IJA and their board, but then also as a person who comes from another group, which also has its own initiatives that kind of overlap with us, which is the Women's Front as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the goal is to create a culture. Yeah, I think I've even said this to some of the board members on the IJA. If you really want to do the work, you go where those people are. And, we're on this juggling Facebook group called Juggling RAR that came about because there was another Facebook group that was, very non-inclusive. So you go to those people. In my experience specifically, the group I was in fostered in me the confidence. They poured into me. They spoke all the greatness into me to let me run for the board. And they stood behind me after I did run for the board. So being a support system for the people that are minorities is huge. It's one of the biggest things you can do is just make a friend and speak greatness into that person. And a lot will come from that. And then as far as the groundwork for the organization is just that, not the IJA, we already know is an exclusive group. So start excluding yourself from the group and finding out where those pockets of people are that are already the misfits and the othered, right? And go to them and just watch. Don't not using your voice, but just being there to watch and listen.
I agree with that. If you want to look at any sort of recruitment program where there are POCs, let's take basketball programs in every city. They go out to where the kids are. They go out where the Black people are. If you want to talk about breakdancing, they go to where the people are. We got to do that too. Now, we are running out of time. We have only about 2 minutes left. I want to say thank you once again to the IJA for approaching Sky King about this idea. And for Sky King, thank you for recruiting all of us. Unfortunately, you couldn't make it, but hopefully we've done you well. And with that being said, I want to take a thank you to the people who have joined and provided great questions. And finally, our panelists, let's let's get one more, maybe 30-second round from each person. Last statement, and I'm gonna start with Alex actually, and then I'm gonna go to Shavela. Then I'm gonna finish with Sam.
Okay, I just want to thank you also, Paris, for sharing this thing. We all miss Sky and hope that we'll see her again soon. I'm just excited to do the work. I really I think that there's a real opportunity here, and I think we have some real resources and people, and I think we're really I'm just ready to go. So that's it.
Excellent. Shavela.
My final thoughts are I'm just extremely grateful to be here. And one of the things that comes to my mind immediately is that I have been asked several times about my opinion. And I know things are changing because each time someone has asked me if I had the emotional bandwidth to deal with the questions. And that's all I can ask, is that before people are reaching out with an issue, that they are making sure that the emotional burden isn't on the POC to handle it. And so far things have been that way. And that's my best advice for folks trying to do the work.
Take us home, Sam.
All right, so I want to say thanks real quick too, because I'm really happy I could be on this and speak about some issues. So thank you all so much. The one thing I want to add on is don't stop with just juggling. If you're going to go into a community, you want to take part. All these communities need other things, and juggling is fun. I love juggling. I love all of you, or I wouldn't be here, right? But people need food, people need shelter, people need other things. And if you are in a position to give those things, and some of it is because of juggling, give those things. You do a gig in a community that's like kind of hurt, they want to see your show, donate it, that's fine. You want to donate some food, something like that, that's awesome. Take part in those communities beyond just trying to spread juggling. Take part, and you don't have to be a member of the community. You could even just sit back and be quiet. But I think that is a really important thing for everybody, is that we should all try to take part in each other's communities as well. So that's my feelings, and thank you all so much.
All right, that is our panel. I want to say thank you to the panelists, and thank you to all the people who came. Race and juggling, I think we got a lot done. Till then, take care. Happy juggling. Peace.
All right. Thanks a million to our panelists. This is Richard Hartnell, your stream tech again, just saying farewell. We're going to take the stream down for just a little bit, so that now is like your bathroom break. Grab a snack, and you may have noticed there's a donation bar in the lower right-hand side of the screen, and you may have also noticed that it hasn't moved during the entire panel. There is a donation link right there. You can type into a web browser if you want to help support this event. Yeah, we'll see you in about 15 minutes. We're going to take the stream down. We're going to jump streams. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can just sit tight, and if you are watching on YouTube, you'll want to go back to the event page on Facebook or to the website and get another link, because the IRC is going to be happening in a different YouTube event. Again, if you're sitting on Facebook, then you can just hang out. If you're in the Zoom room, it's about to get real boring, so you're free to close that now. We'll see you really shortly. Thanks again.